All right, welcome back. This week we are going to move into the second part of the textbook, which is called the treatment. So we have spent the last few weeks learning about the infection, how stress impacts us physically and mentally, and then, of course, how that can lead to things like burnout and compassion fatigue. So, how do we combat this? This is where the PERTS model comes into play to help us strengthen resiliency. So to begin, let's review the PERTS model. There are 6 parts to this model, and they include self-regulation, mental flexibility, motivation and a self-directed achiever, positive psychological strengths, interpersonal connection and support, and then self-care and revitalization. So, of course, each part is critical to becoming a more resilient professional. And we'll examine each one of these parts, beginning with self regulation, which is, of course, the heart of resiliency. So, before we get into self regulation, which will be our next chapter to start studying this model, let's learn more about the treatment with regards to a model on the stages of change. So in our video today, this is going to be our focus, learning more about the stages of change and exploring how we move through each one of those stages. So the stages of change is a trans-theoretical model that identifies 6 stages of change. We have pre-contemplation, contemplation, preparation, action, maintenance, and then relapse. And according to this model, you must move from the pre-contemplation stage, which is the stage that we're unaware of the negative consequences of what's happening, to the contemplation stage, where we become aware of those negative consequences and the need for change. So let's look at this model further. All right, so pre-contemplation, as mentioned on the last slide, are when you are thinking about change or you're not thinking about change because you're not aware that there's a problem, or maybe you're even in denial. Contemplation is where you are willing to consider that there's a possibility that a problem exists, and you start to recognize that thoughts, emotions, and behaviors may be problematic. So even with this recognition, you may still feel reluctant to change those behaviors. So that's important to note that happens in contemplation. Preparation, when we move to preparation, this stage is when you're ready to act. You believe changing your behaviors can lead to a healthier life. Then action, you put your action into, or your plan into action. And in this stage, you have begun to change that behavior. And then in maintenance, you have sustained new behaviors for a while and intend to continue on that path. And then there's relapse. Relapse is when you have no desire to return to your unhealthy behaviors, but recognize, of course, that this is possible, and you prepare for preventing relapse. So you're also mentally prepared for any setbacks. So recognize that if you do slip up, you can get back on track and recover. So relapse can happen. We plan for it, and we plan to try to prevent it. But if it occurs, you can still get back on board and continue on with what was working. This model can be applied to anything in your life that you wish to change. So when we look at this from a career perspective, we want to identify behaviors or coping mechanisms that aren't really working well. These can be things like substance abuse, or even things like watching television for hours and hours after work is a way of checking out of life, checking out from family, checking out from that stressful day of work. So, whatever it may be, this model, when applied, can help us take action and change those behaviors that might be sabotaging our life. So we have discussed the stages of change in this video. Next in this chapter, you will read about, you'll review how to rewire the brain towards resiliency and identify the dimensions of self-recovery. Then next chapter, we will get into the PERTS model that we reviewed earlier today, and we will start by learning more about how to master self-regulation. So until then, make it a great week.